How dare you come here with her? Lillian's frail voice broke the sterile silence of the hospital room as Adrian Voss stood at the foot of her bed, divorce papers in one hand, his mistress Bianca clutching the other. But before he could say a word, a calm, commanding voice echoed from the corner. "Interesting choice of timing, Mr. Voss," said Gareth Langford, Adrian's powerful boss, stepping out of the shadows, sitting right beside Lillian's bed, holding her hand gently. Adrian's face went pale. The same man who signed his paychecks was the one comforting the wife he came to discard. And what happened next would change everything. Before we continue, please like, share and subscribe for more captivating stories about betrayal, karma, and redemption. Now, let's dive into the story. The hospital corridor smelled faintly of antiseptic and sadness. Adrian Voss walked briskly down the hallway, his polished shoes echoing sharply against the linoleum floor. In one hand, he clutched a slim brown envelope, the divorce papers, and in the other, the manicured hand of his mistress, Bianca Hale. Bianca's heels clicked beside him. "Do we really have to do this here?" she muttered, adjusting her sunglasses though they were indoors. "Hospitals creep me out." Adrian didn't answer. His jaw was tight, his expression unreadable. "It's better this way," he finally said. "She needs to understand it's over. I'm not living in limbo anymore." Bianca rolled her eyes. "She's sick, not stupid, Adrian. You could have just sent them through a lawyer." He stopped at the doorway to room 314, his heartbeat slowing for a moment. He hadn't seen Lillian in weeks, not since the diagnosis, not since he'd stopped pretending to care. His hand hesitated on the doorknob. Bianca smirked. "Don't tell me you're nervous now." "I'm not," he said quickly, straightening his tie. "Let's just get this over with." When the door opened, the soft hum of machines filled the air. Lillian sat propped up in bed, pale but graceful, her eyes drifting toward the window. The sunlight kissed her skin, making her look fragile, but not weak. Her voice was quiet when she spoke. "Adrian." "Lillian," he replied, stepping in with forced confidence. "You look well." She smiled faintly. "For someone dying, you mean?" He didn't answer. He placed the envelope on the small table beside her bed. "These are the papers. It's better if we make it official now." Bianca lingered near the door, inspecting her nails like she was waiting for a cab. Lillian's gaze shifted toward her, then back to Adrian. "You brought her," she said softly. Not a question, a simple observation. Adrian cleared his throat. "We're moving forward. It's time you did too." The silence in the hospital room was heavy, broken only by the faint rhythm of the heart monitor. Lillian Voss turned her frail face toward her husband, her eyes calm, almost too calm. She didn't flinch when she saw the divorce envelope on the table. "So this is how it ends," she said softly. Adrian shifted uncomfortably, straightening his cufflinks as if the action might make him appear in control. "It's not about ending anything," he began. "It's about being realistic. You're not getting better, Lillian. It's time we both moved on." Her lips curved in a faint, sad smile. "Moved on," she repeated. "You mean you already have?" Behind him, Bianca Hale sighed dramatically, her tone sharp. "Lillian, don't make this harder than it needs to be. Adrian's been through a lot too, you know." Lillian turned her head slowly, her pale eyes steady. "Has he?" she asked. "Because I was under the impression I was the one with cancer." Bianca stiffened, looking away, muttering, "I didn't mean." But Lillian raised a weak hand, silencing her. "It's all right. I'm not angry anymore. I spent too long being angry at things that no longer matter." She looked back at Adrian, her voice soft but unwavering. "You can have your freedom. I've already made peace with losing you." Something in Adrian's chest tightened, but he pushed it aside. "Then sign them," he said, gesturing toward the papers. "Let's be done." Lillian nodded faintly. "I will." "But, Adrian." Her eyes flicked toward the corner of the room, toward Mr. Gareth Langford, who had remained silent until now, his posture calm, his expression unreadable. Lillian continued, "Before I do, there's something you should know." Adrian frowned, sensing an unfamiliar chill crawl down his spine. "What is it?" Gareth finally stood, his tall frame casting a shadow across the sterile light. "Perhaps I should be the one to explain," he said evenly, his voice measured but cold. Adrian turned, utterly confused, his confidence slipping. "Why are you here, sir?" he asked, his voice quieter now. Gareth's piercing eyes met his. "Because, Adrian, I have every reason to be." Adrian Voss stood frozen, his polished confidence cracking like glass. Mr. Gareth Langford, the man who practically owned the company Adrian worked for, stood only a few feet away, tall, calm, composed. The older man's presence filled the room without effort. His charcoal suit looked out of place amid the sterile hospital walls, yet somehow he belonged there more than Adrian did. "Sir," Adrian began, his voice thin. I didn't realize you knew my wife." Gareth's gaze didn't waver. "You never asked." The words landed with quiet weight. Behind him, Bianca fidgeted, clutching her purse nervously. "Mr. Langford," she said with a forced smile, "what a surprise. We were just visiting." He cut her off without looking at her. "You can save the act, Miss Hale. I know who you are." Her face paled instantly. Lillian, still sitting upright in her bed, looked between the two men with that same haunting calm. "Gareth has been kind to me," she said softly. "He's visited every week since I started treatment." Adrian blinked. "He has." "Yes," Gareth said, folding his hands behind his back. "Unlike you, I don't disappear when people become inconvenient." Adrian's jaw clenched. "With respect, sir, this is my personal life." Gareth's eyes narrowed, the faintest trace of disappointment flashing across his face. "Personal? You brought your mistress into a hospital room to hand divorce papers to a dying woman. Forgive me if I fail to see the professionalism in that." Bianca tried to step forward, her voice shaky. "We didn't mean." "Leave," Gareth said quietly, his voice like steel wrapped in velvet. "Both of you. Before you embarrass yourselves any further." Adrian's pride flared, but the weight of Gareth's stare kept him silent. He turned to Lillian, searching her face for some sign of sympathy. There was none. She looked serene, distant, like someone who had already made peace with everything that mattered. "Go, Adrian," she whispered. "You've already said goodbye." He hesitated, but the air in the room was no longer his to claim. He turned, the divorce papers still unsigned, and left with Bianca trailing behind him, his footsteps echoing like a slow surrender. Behind him, Gareth gently placed his hand over Lillian's. "Rest," he murmured. "You've endured enough." The next morning, Adrian Voss walked into the office with his usual air of authority. Sharp suit, polished shoes, the look of a man in control. But underneath the facade, his stomach twisted. The memory of the hospital still clung to him like a bad dream. The sterile smell, Lillian's calm eyes, and most of all, Mr. Gareth Langford's quiet stare. He stepped into the elevator, rehearsing in his mind how he'd smooth things over. "It's fine. He'll see it as personal. He won't mix it with work." But when the elevator doors opened to Gareth's top-floor office, the illusion of confidence began to crumble. "Mr. Langford will see you now," said the secretary, her tone unreadable. Adrian entered, forcing a smile. Gareth sat behind his desk, reviewing a file, his posture impeccable, his silence deliberate. The air felt cold, controlled. "Sir," Adrian began, "about yesterday." Gareth raised a hand slightly. "Close the door." Adrian obeyed. The sound of the latch clicking felt final. For a moment, Gareth said nothing. He simply looked at Adrian, not with anger, but with something far worse, disappointment. "I didn't expect to see you at the hospital," Adrian offered, his tone light. "You and Lillian. You're acquainted?" Gareth's expression didn't shift. "More than you ever realized." Adrian hesitated. "I meant no disrespect. Lillian's been through a lot, and I..." "Brought your mistress," Gareth interrupted flatly. And divorce papers. Adrian swallowed hard. It was a personal decision, sir. Painful, yes, but... Gareth leaned back, his gaze sharp. Painful for whom? You, or the woman you abandoned while she fought for her life? The silence that followed was suffocating. Adrian tried to hold his composure, but Gareth's words hit harder than he expected. You're a talented man, Adrian, Gareth said finally. Ambitious. But there's a difference between drive and cruelty. Adrian shifted, forcing a laugh that sounded brittle. I assure you, my personal life won't affect my work. Gareth looked at him for a long moment, then said quietly, You'd be surprised how often it does. As Adrian left the office, his confidence was gone, replaced by something he hadn't felt in years, unease. For the first time, he realized Gareth Langford's silence wasn't just disappointment. It was warning. Later that afternoon, Bianca Hale stormed into Adrian's office, slamming the door behind her. Her perfume filled the room before her voice did. What was that today? She demanded, tossing her purse onto the chair. Your boss looked at me like I was dirt under his shoes. Adrian rubbed his temples, already exhausted. Keep your voice down, Bianca. This is a professional building. Oh, please, she scoffed, crossing her arms. Half the people here already know what's going on between us. You're not fooling anyone. Adrian's tone hardened. That's exactly what I'm trying to avoid. You walking in here like this doesn't help. Bianca laughed bitterly. Avoid? I gave up my job, my reputation for you, Adrian. And now you want to pretend I don't exist. He looked up sharply. You didn't give up anything. You chased this. You wanted a better life. Well, this is what it looks like. Bianca's eyes narrowed. A better life? Watching you grovel to your boss after he caught you bringing me to your sick wife's hospital bed. The words hit like a slap. Adrian's hand curled into a fist. You don't know when to stop talking, do you? Maybe you should have thought about that before embarrassing yourself in front of him, she fired back. Do you have any idea who that man is to her? Adrian froze. What are you talking about? Bianca shrugged dramatically. I don't know, but the way he looked at you? Like he wanted to crush you. Maybe you're not the only one Lillian had secrets with. He stood, his voice low and dangerous. Don't ever suggest that again. Bianca smirked, sensing she'd struck a nerve. Touchy. I thought you didn't care what she does. Adrian turned away, pacing toward the window, trying to calm his racing thoughts. Just go, Bianca. I'll call you later. But as she picked up her purse, she muttered under her breath, If you still have a job to call from. The door slammed behind her. Adrian stared out at the city skyline, trying to bury the unease clawing at his chest. For the first time, he realized that Bianca's mouth might destroy him faster than his guilt ever could. The next morning, Adrian Voss was called to Mr. Gareth Langford's office again. No appointment. No warning. Just a brief message from the secretary. Mr. Langford would like to see you now. Adrian straightened his tie, trying to shake off the anxiety twisting in his gut. Calm down. It's business. Just business. When he entered, Gareth was standing by the window, watching the city with his hands clasped behind his back. The morning light cut across his face, calm, but unreadable. Sit down, Gareth said quietly. Adrian obeyed, his pulse drumming in his ears. Sir, if this is about... It's about many things, Gareth interrupted. Some professional. Some personal. Adrian froze. The tone was precise, cold, the kind of tone Gareth used when closing deals, or ending them. I've been reviewing some reports, Gareth continued, turning toward him. Your department's numbers don't align. Funds are unaccounted for. Small amounts at first, easy to miss. But over time, they add up. Adrian's throat went dry. Sir, there must be a mistake. I don't make mistakes, Adrian, Gareth said flatly. The audit will confirm it. But let's set that aside for a moment. He leaned against the desk, arms crossed. "Tell me something. How long have you known Lillian?" Adrian blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" "She's my wife." Gareth's lips curved faintly, but it wasn't amusement. "No, I meant before you married her. Before you knew what she was capable of." Adrian frowned. "Capable of what?" Gareth didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked back to the window, his tone thoughtful. "She's extraordinary, you know. Resilient. Graceful. Stronger than anyone gives her credit for. I've seen men crumble with less than what she's endured." Adrian felt something cold slip down his spine. "You sound like you know her very well." Gareth turned then, and this time, his expression carried a trace of something dangerous. "Better than you ever did." The silence stretched, sharp and heavy. Adrian stood abruptly. "If you're implying something—" Gareth cut him off, his voice calm but final. "I'm not implying, Mr. Voss. I'm informing you. What happens next is entirely of your own making." Adrian's composure faltered. For the first time, he wasn't sure whether Gareth was talking about his job or his marriage. The tension in the office was thick enough to cut. After their last exchange, Gareth Langford requested a private conversation with Adrian Voss in the executive boardroom, away from the curious stares of staff. When Adrian entered, Gareth was already there, jacket off, sleeves rolled up, looking less like a CEO and more like a man about to deliver judgment. "Sit," Gareth said. His tone wasn't loud, but it carried the authority of someone used to being obeyed. Adrian hesitated, then took a seat. "Sir, if this is about the audit—" "This isn't about numbers," Gareth cut in. "This is about character." The word character landed like a hammer. Gareth paced slowly behind his chair. "Do you know what struck me most when I visited Lillian?" Adrian clenched his jaw, staying silent. "She was calm," Gareth continued. "Not bitter. Not angry. Just disappointed. And when someone that kind feels disappointment, it says more about you than 1,000 accusations." Adrian looked away, the weight of those words pressing against his chest. "I don't owe anyone an explanation for my marriage," he muttered. Gareth stopped pacing. "You owed her respect. You owed her compassion. And you failed at both." Adrian's composure cracked. "You don't understand, sir. You don't know what it's like being tied to someone who's constantly ill, who can't." "Stop." The single word cut him off like a blade. Gareth's eyes burned with quiet fury. "You think sickness is an inconvenience? That loyalty is optional when life gets uncomfortable." Adrian swallowed hard, unable to meet his gaze. "Do you know why I'm so disgusted, Adrian?" Gareth's voice lowered, steady but cold. "Because I've seen men destroy themselves for power, for greed, for lust, but rarely for something as pitiful as cowardice." Adrian's face flushed. "Cowardice?" "Yes," Gareth said firmly. "You ran from pain instead of standing in it. You hid behind another woman because it was easier than being decent to the one who believed in you." Silence. Adrian's hands tightened on the table, the first hint of shame flickering in his eyes. Then Gareth leaned forward, his tone almost quiet. "The world has a way of returning what you give it, Adrian. Pray it doesn't come back the same way you sent it out." The hospital room was quiet again, sunlight spilling across the pale sheets. Lillian Voss sat propped up by a few pillows, sketching softly in a notebook resting on her lap. Her fingers trembled slightly, but her strokes were steady, graceful, deliberate. The door opened with a gentle knock. Gareth Langford stepped in, carrying a paper bag from the cafe downstairs. "You haven't eaten since morning," he said, setting it beside her. Lillian smiled faintly. "You're persistent." He chuckled softly. "Occupational hazard. I manage stubborn people for a living." She set her pencil down, studying him with quiet gratitude. "Thank you, Gareth, for being kind. You don't have to keep visiting." He sat in the chair beside her, his expression softening. "Maybe I don't have to. But I want to. For a moment, the only sound was the rhythmic hum of the machines. Then Lillian's tone shifted, quieter, more thoughtful. You spoke with Adrian, didn't you? Gareth hesitated, then nodded. Yes. He won't admit it, but he's starting to realize the weight of what he's done. Her gaze drifted toward the window. I knew long before he thought I did. Gareth frowned slightly. You knew about? She nodded once, calm and certain. Bianca. The late-night calls, the changed passwords, the way his eyes stopped seeing me even when I was standing right there. There was no bitterness in her voice, only acceptance, the kind that comes from pain already faced. I wanted to confront him, she continued, but then the diagnosis came, and I realized I didn't want my last days to be about revenge. I wanted peace. Gareth looked at her with quiet admiration. You're remarkable, Lillian. She smiled softly. No. Just tired of fighting the wrong battles. He leaned forward, voice low. You didn't deserve what he did. And he's going to learn that, not because you punish him, but because life will. Lillian looked down at her sketch, a pair of hands letting go of a wilted flower. I don't want him destroyed, Gareth. I just want him to remember what he threw away. Her voice trembled, but her eyes didn't. In that moment, Gareth understood. Her strength wasn't in holding on, it was in knowing exactly when to let go. The hospital room faded into the soft haze of memory as Gareth Langford sat quietly, watching Lillian doze off. Her breathing was slow and steady, the sunlight brushing across her face. He found himself drifting back to a time, years ago, when their paths had first crossed. 5 years earlier. A younger Gareth stood in the rain outside a small neighborhood cafe, his suit drenched, his briefcase clasped tight. He had just lost everything. A failed merger, a scandalous accusation that cost him his first company. His name was poison on every investor's lips. He'd come to the cafe not to eat, but to escape the noise of his own downfall. That was where he met her, Lillian, cheerful, working behind the counter in a worn apron and a kind smile. You look like a man who needs something warm, she'd said, sliding a cup of coffee his way. He'd laughed bitterly. You don't even know me. She'd shrugged. I don't have to. You look like someone who's forgotten that tomorrow exists. Those words, simple, almost playful, had hit deeper than she knew. Over the next few weeks, she listened more than she spoke, asking nothing in return. She gave him space to rebuild, not as a businessman, but as a person. When his reputation began to recover and he opened Langford Holdings, he offered her a position in his office. She declined gently. I don't need a job, she'd said. Just promise you'll remember how it feels to be human when success returns. He never forgot that. Now, years later, sitting by her hospital bed, Gareth felt the weight of that promise. Lillian stirred awake, smiling weakly. You're lost in thought. He nodded. Just remembering the first time we met. She chuckled softly. You looked like a drowned executive. He smiled back. And you looked like someone who could see through walls. Her laughter faded into a gentle silence. Gareth leaned closer, voice low. You gave me my second chance, Lillian. Now I intend to give you yours. The atmosphere in Langford Holdings was unusually heavy that morning. Whispers moved through the glass corridors like a quiet storm. People could feel it. Something was about to happen. Inside his office, Adrian Voss sat rigid at his desk, pretending to type while his mind replayed every conversation, every transaction, every choice he might have to defend. The door opened without a knock. Gareth Langford entered, folder in hand, face composed but cold. Adrian, he said simply. Adrian stood immediately. Sir, I was just about to send you. Sit, Gareth interrupted, closing the door behind him. The word landed like a command. Adrian obeyed. Gareth dropped the folder on the desk. I've been patient, he began. I wanted to believe the discrepancies were oversight, maybe poor bookkeeping. But they weren't. Adrian's mouth went dry. Sir, I can explain. No, Gareth said sharply, his voice cutting through the air. You can listen. He opened the folder, sliding a series of documents across the table. Transfer logs, falsified invoices, signatures. 3 separate accounts. 2 offshore. All tied to your authorization. You funneled company funds into shell projects that never existed. Adrian's blood ran cold. That's not... I didn't. Gareth leaned forward, his tone steady, surgical. You betrayed this company the same way you betrayed your wife, for greed, for convenience, for ego. Adrian's defenses crumbled. I was under pressure. You don't understand what it's like trying to keep up. I understand perfectly, Gareth snapped. You wanted everything, the position, the money, the mistress, and you thought no one would notice what it cost. Silence. Adrian stared at the papers, the evidence undeniable. Gareth stood, straightening his jacket. You're finished here, Adrian. Effective immediately. Adrian's voice broke. Sir, please, don't do this. I'll fix it. I'll repay. It's not about repayment, Gareth said, opening the door. It's about integrity, something you can't buy back. As Adrian stood in shock, Gareth paused in the doorway, his final words low but firm. And if you ever cared about Lillian, remember this moment. It's the day your lies stopped protecting you. Then he left, the sound of the door closing echoing like judgment itself. Adrian sank into his chair, the folder of proof staring back at him, the paper trail of his downfall. The penthouse felt colder than usual that night. The floor-to-ceiling windows reflected the glittering city below, a view that once made Bianca Hale feel powerful. Now, it only made her nervous. She paced the marble floor in a silk robe, phone in hand, waiting for Adrian Voss to call. He was hours late. When the door finally opened, he stepped in, disheveled, eyes hollow, no trace of his usual arrogance. What happened? Bianca demanded immediately. You look like hell. Adrian threw his briefcase onto the couch and collapsed beside it. It's over, he muttered. She blinked. What do you mean over? He ran a hand through his hair, voice cracking. Gareth fired me. The audit. He knows everything. Bianca froze. Everything. Adrian nodded. The offshore accounts. The false invoices. He had proof. For a moment, she was silent. Then the panic hit. Oh my God. You said no one could trace it. I thought. You thought? She snapped, her voice rising. You promised me we'd be secure. I left my job for you. I lied for you. Adrian looked up, anger flashing in his tired eyes. You didn't do it for me, Bianca. You did it for the lifestyle. Bianca's face twisted. Don't turn this on me. You told me we'd have it all. The cars, the travel, the business. Business? He cut in bitterly. There is no business. There's nothing left. The silence stretched between them, sharp and final. Then Bianca laughed, not out of humor, but disbelief. So what now, Adrian? We sell the penthouse? Move into a little apartment somewhere? You think I'll just start over with you? He stared at her, something inside him breaking. You're really asking that now? Yes, she said, voice trembling with fury. Because I didn't sign up for failure. Adrian stood slowly, realizing in that moment how little she'd ever loved him, and how much he'd lost chasing her approval. Then leave, he said quietly. You always wanted freedom. Take it. Bianca grabbed her purse, eyes blazing. Don't worry, I will. The door slammed, echoing through the empty apartment. Adrian sank into the silence, staring at the city lights below. For the first time, he understood what Lillian had meant by peace, and how far he'd fallen from it. The next morning, Adrian Voss woke to silence. The penthouse was still. Too still. The coffee machine blinked with a red light, the fridge hummed quietly, but the life he once knew, the noise, the ego, the control, was gone. Bianca's clothes were missing. So was her perfume, her jewelry, even her toothbrush. In their place sat a note on the counter, written in her hurried script. "I can't do this. Don't contact me. B." He read it twice, though the words barely registered. His chest felt hollow, his mind foggy. He stumbled into the living room, where piles of unopened letters and unpaid bills covered the coffee table. 4 years, he'd ignored them. Money always flowed, reputation always covered the rest. But now, the phone calls wouldn't stop. Bank, investors, lawyers, all circling. When the phone buzzed again, he answered with shaking hands. "Mr. Voss," said the cold voice of his accountant. "We've received confirmation. The board has frozen your assets pending investigation. Your accounts are inaccessible until the audit clears." Adrian's breath caught. "That's not possible." "I'm afraid it is." The call ended. He sank onto the couch, head in his hands, staring at the panoramic city view. The skyline that once made him feel untouchable now looked miles away, distant and indifferent. Memories began to flood in, Lillian's quiet strength, her gentle voice when she said, "You've already said goodbye." At the time, he'd thought she was weak. Now he understood, she'd been free. He looked around the cold apartment, the one he'd filled with luxury to drown out his guilt. Every object seemed to mock him. The award on the shelf. The framed business magazine with his face on the cover. It all meant nothing now. He picked up the divorce papers he'd thrown on the counter days earlier, and signed, wrinkled, untouched. For the first time, he realized Lillian had never refused to sign out of bitterness. She'd simply stopped playing his game. Adrian dropped the papers and let out a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. In that echoing room, he finally admitted the truth, not aloud, but deep inside. He had destroyed everything worth keeping. The hospital garden was a small sanctuary tucked behind the building, a place where sunlight fell gently between the branches and wind carried the scent of roses. Lillian Voss sat on a bench wrapped in a light shawl, her sketchbook open on her lap. Her hand moved slowly across the page, drawing the outline of a sunrise. The colors were soft, peach, gold, pale blue. She didn't draw pain anymore. Only beginnings. A warm voice interrupted her thoughts. "That looks beautiful," said Nurse Clara, setting a tray of tea and fruit beside her. "You're improving, Mrs. Voss." Lillian smiled faintly. "I'm surviving." "That's close enough." Clara chuckled. "You've got a poet's heart." She hesitated, lowering her voice. "Mr. Langford's been asking for you. He said he'll stop by after his meeting." Lillian nodded, her expression calm. "He worries too much." Clara tilted her head. "Maybe he just cares." When the nurse left, Lillian gazed out over the flowers swaying in the soft wind. She thought about all she had lost, her marriage, her home, her old life. And yet, she didn't feel broken anymore. Forgiveness wasn't something she gave for others' sake, it was what she gave herself to finally breathe again. A familiar voice spoke behind her. "You look peaceful today." She turned and saw Gareth Langford, his usual authority softened into something more human. He carried a small box of chocolates and a newspaper. "Bribing me again?" she teased. He smiled. "It's called motivation." He sat beside her, and for a long while they simply listened to the sound of wind and distant laughter from the children's wing. "I thought peace would mean forgetting," Lillian said finally. "But it doesn't. It's remembering without pain." Gareth nodded slowly. "And forgiveness?" She looked up at the sky. "It's not about letting him off the hook. It's about letting myself live again." He smiled, watching her sketch another line of sunlight. "You always were the stronger one." She closed her sketchbook and leaned back, whispering, "Not stronger. Just done hurting." In that moment, surrounded by kindness, Lillian realized she had already won, not through revenge, but through release. The city outside blazed with neon lights, but inside the penthouse, Adrian Voss sat in near darkness. The space that once echoed with conversation, laughter, and ambition now felt like a tomb of everything he'd lost. Half-empty wine glasses still sat on the counter, relics of nights with Bianca that he could barely remember now. The sound of the clock ticking on the wall gnawed at him. Each second was too loud, too slow. He stood and wandered through the rooms aimlessly. Every corner reminded him of what he'd built, and what he'd destroyed. The leather couch where he'd once worked late into the night now seemed oversized, pointless. The view from the balcony, once his pride, now made him dizzy. The city lights looked like a million tiny reminders that life went on without him. He opened the fridge. Empty. The wardrobe. Half of his clothes gone. The bedroom. The bed too large for one person. It was as if the world had quietly decided to erase him piece by piece. He sat on the edge of the bed, staring at his reflection in the window. The man staring back wasn't the confident executive he once admired. His face was thinner, eyes hollow, posture defeated. For years, he had chased the idea of freedom, the kind that meant no accountability, no emotional weight. He'd wanted to escape compassion, commitment, consequence. Now he had it. Freedom. And it was unbearable. His phone buzzed once. A message from an unknown number. Mr. Voss, this is from Langford Holdings. We've completed your termination paperwork. You will receive official notice tomorrow. He dropped the phone onto the bed, covering his face with his hands. There was no one left to blame, no one left to impress. Only the echo of Lillian's words in his memory. You can have your freedom. I've already made peace with losing you. He thought he had won that day. Now he realized she had. Tears blurred the lights outside as he whispered into the silence. Lillian. I'm so sorry. The city didn't answer. It just kept glowing, indifferent, a silent witness to a man finally learning what emptiness truly felt like. Rain streaked the glass that morning as Adrian Voss sat on the floor of his silent apartment, surrounded by unpaid bills and unopened letters. The weight of the past few weeks had stripped him of everything, his career, his reputation, even the false comfort of his pride. A knock echoed from the door. He didn't move at first, assuming it was another debt collector. But the knock came again, firmer this time. When he opened the door, Gareth Langford stood there. Impeccably dressed, umbrella dripping rainwater, eyes calm but unreadable. Adrian froze. Sir. Gareth looked him over, the hollow cheeks, the wrinkled shirt, the emptiness behind his eyes. You look human again, he said quietly. Adrian stepped aside, embarrassed. If you came to remind me what I've lost, you can save your breath. I didn't come for that, Gareth replied, walking in. I came because I spoke with Lillian yesterday. At her name, Adrian's heart twisted. How is she? Gareth's tone softened. Better than expected. She's fighting. She said she forgave you. Adrian swallowed hard, staring at the floor. I don't deserve that. No, Gareth said. You don't. But forgiveness isn't about deserving. It's about freeing herself from what you did. Adrian nodded, the shame settling deeper. You must think I'm beyond saving. Gareth took a step closer. I think you're a man who's finally seeing what matters. That's a start. He handed Adrian an envelope. Inside was a small card with a hospital logo. She asked the foundation to take on volunteers. They need help organizing charity events and patient support. They need people who understand loss. Adrian blinked. You want me to? I want you to show up, Adrian, Gareth interrupted firmly. Not as an executive, not as someone looking for redemption. Just as a man who can do something right, even if it's small. The rain outside softened, and for the first time in months, Adrian felt a flicker of purpose. He looked up, voice trembling. Do you really think I can make anything right again? Gareth's gaze was steady. You can't change the past. But you can decide what kind of man wakes up tomorrow. As Gareth left, the card trembled in Adrian's hand, a simple invitation to begin again. The first morning Adrian Voss walked through the hospital doors as a volunteer, he felt smaller than he ever had before. Gone was the man in tailored suits and polished shoes. Now he wore a simple white shirt, rolled sleeves, and a name badge that read, Volunteer, Adrian. The halls smelled the same as they did the day he brought Lillian those divorce papers. But this time, He didn't walk with pride. He walked with purpose. At first, the staff barely noticed him. He fetched coffee for nurses, restocked shelves, and delivered lunch trays to patients. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't even appreciated at times. But that was the point. For once, he wasn't in control. He was serving. One afternoon, Nurse Clara smiled as he handed her a stack of blankets. "Didn't expect you to last a week," she teased. Adrian chuckled faintly. "Neither did I." "What keeps you coming back?" she asked. He paused, glancing toward the corridor where Lillian's room used to be. "Because this is the only place where I ever learned what real strength looks like." Clara followed his gaze and understood. "She made quite an impression on everyone," she said softly. "She made one on me," he murmured. Over the weeks, Adrian grew quieter, more patient. He learned the rhythm of kindness, the quiet art of helping without being seen. He organized patient events, pushed wheelchairs, listened to strangers talk about their fears and families. Sometimes, when the day ended, he'd walk past the garden where Lillian once sat. The sketch of her sunrise still burned into his mind. One evening, Gareth found him there, cleaning paintbrushes after a children's art session. "You're still here," Gareth said. Adrian smiled faintly. "It's strange. I come here to help, but it feels like I'm the one being healed." Gareth nodded approvingly. "That's how it works. Redemption isn't given, it's lived." As the last rays of sunset glowed through the windows, Adrian felt something new settle in his chest. Not pride, not guilt, but peace. For the first time in years, he wasn't trying to prove anything. He was simply becoming someone better than he used to be. It was late afternoon when Adrian Voss finally gathered the courage to walk into room 314, the same room where everything had fallen apart months ago. The walls looked different now, softer somehow. Sunlight streamed through the curtains, filling the space with gold instead of gray. And there she was, Lillian. She sat by the window in a light blue gown, sketchbook open on her lap, just as he remembered. But this time, her hair had begun to grow back, and there was color in her cheeks, fragile but alive. When she looked up and saw him standing there, her expression didn't harden. She smiled gently, almost sadly. "Adrian," she said softly, "I wondered when you'd come." He took a hesitant step forward, voice trembling. "I didn't think I had the right." "You don't," she said kindly. "But I'm glad you came anyway." For a moment, neither spoke. The air was heavy with everything that had been left unsaid, the apologies, the regrets, the years of love turned into silence. Finally, Adrian whispered, "I've been volunteering here, helping where I can." She nodded, turning a page in her sketchbook. "I know. Nurse Clara told me. She said you're good with the patients." He smiled faintly. "I don't know about good, but I'm trying." Lillian's pencil paused. "You've changed," she said. "I had to," he replied. "The man you married, he wasn't someone worth loving. I see that now." Her eyes glistened, but her tone stayed calm. "You were worth loving once, Adrian. You just stopped believing that kindness mattered." He swallowed hard. "Lillian, I'm so sorry. For everything." She closed the sketchbook gently. "I forgave you a long time ago." He looked at her, hope flickering. "Then maybe—" "No," she interrupted softly. "Forgiveness isn't an invitation to go back. It's a chance to move forward." Adrian nodded slowly, tears threatening. "You're really leaving me behind, aren't you?" She smiled, serene. "I'm not leaving you behind. I'm just walking a different path." As he turned to go, she called out, "Adrian?" He looked back. "Live better this time," she said. "That's all the apology I need." Months passed. The city's rhythm never slowed, but for Adrian Voss, everything moved differently now. He still volunteered at the hospital, organizing art days for recovering patients and managing donations for the cancer wing. The work was quiet, steady, nothing like the corporate chaos he once thrived on, but it gave him something far greater: peace. Sometimes, he caught glimpses of Lillian in the garden, sketching while Gareth Langford read beside her. They didn't see him watching. He preferred it that way. Seeing her smile was enough. She was alive. She was healing. And that was all he needed. One evening, as he packed up supplies, Nurse Clara handed him a folded newspaper. "You might want to see this," she said. The headline read, "Bianca Hale arrested in financial scheme involving multiple bank frauds." Adrian stared at it for a long moment, his jaw tightening, not in anger, but in understanding. The woman who once flaunted her beauty and ambition now faced the same ruin she'd helped him build. Poetic justice, he thought quietly. He set the paper aside and looked out through the hospital window at the sunset. For the first time in years, the world looked gentle again. That night, he visited the garden after everyone left. Lillian's latest painting, a sunrise bursting through storm clouds, hung in the patient art display. Underneath it, she'd written, "The sky always forgives the storm." Adrian smiled, tracing the edge of the frame with his fingers. "You did it, Lillian," he whispered. "You found your peace." Then, with a deep breath, he turned and walked out into the evening. No chauffeur, no luxury car, just a man who had finally learned the value of humility. He didn't have everything he once wanted, but he had something he never knew he needed, a clean heart and a second chance. As the city lights glimmered above him, Adrian knew one truth. Sometimes losing everything is the only way to find yourself again. Never measure love or success by wealth or pride. True strength lies in humility, forgiveness, and learning from your own storms. If you were touched by this story of betrayal, redemption, and grace, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more heartfelt stories that remind us that every ending can become a new beginning.